But I opened my eyes and it was so incredible. I saw angels everywhere. And what blew me away is that I knew they were there the whole time.
When Bentley Hornak was 7 years old, she died on an operating table and was lifted above the surgical scene by angels, where she saw her body, all of the equipment, and the chaos of doctors frantically trying to revive her. Today, she shares her story and the impact it's had on the rest of her life. Welcome to A Stronger Faith, a podcast that places you in the heart of the experiences that change the faith and the trajectory of the lives of everyday people. I'm Stacy McCants, and I want you to know that we pray for you. We pray that God pulls you into a richer connection with Him through what you hear on this channel. If you have a story of God doing that, or if you have a guest recommendation, reach out to us at astrongerfaith.org/contact. We love hearing from our listeners and are really encouraged when we hear how God is moving in their lives. Today's guest has a near-death experience that includes her consciousness separating from her body and her witnessing the scene from above as angels enveloped her. Please meet Bentley Hornak. I was told you had an NDE and near-death experiences, and I just think they are a wonderful gift from God, and science debates them. It's interesting, though, that as science has moved on and advanced as it relates to consciousness and what people report with near-death experiences, increasingly, they don't have an answer that they thought they had. And so you're here to talk about your near-death experience. Welcome, Bentley.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for letting me be here and giving the opportunity to share.
So this happened when you were a child. You were having, I guess, maybe even born into some health problems. So just talk about it.
Okay, I'll kind of take you to the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, when I was born in 1969, and I was born with congenital heart defects. And not just even your run-of-the-mill common heart defects. It was tetralogy Fallot. It was all kinds of, it's ASD correction, all these things that at that time were not easily repaired. And the other thing that's special and worth noting about my anatomy is that I have complete situs inversus. So all my organs are completely reversed.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And not only that, my heart is over here and it's dextrocardia, so it's twisted. So it's worth noting because back in the day, usually doctors would only see babies like me in pathology because there were so many complications that they didn't have the medical advancement to do any sort of corrections. But when I was born, they called me a blue baby because of my heart defects, and then through that they found my anatomy, and I was very limited in how much oxygen that I could get because I had all these heart valve issues.
Yeah, I guess. So this was back in the 70s. So yeah. Think about
69
where we were from a medical technology standpoint. Okay.
Exactly. And my family, we were living in Southern California at the time. And at the time with the pediatrician, he said there really aren't surgeons that this surgery doesn't really exist that she needs. And so I was able to get to about 3 years old, and I was declining. I had failure to thrive. I was really little, and I would get winded just eating. And so then they realized it's time. We've got to do something. We've got to intervene. And what was really cool at the time, living in Southern California, my parents found 2 surgeons that were willing to do the surgery, one of the surgeons, the cardiothoracic surgeon, was at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, and then the other one was at UAB in Alabama in Birmingham. But living in California, we're like, this is wonderful. It was a 45-minute drive. So I had my first surgery when I was 3, and they didn't really tell my parents what to expect. They're like, we'll just do as much as we can, given her condition.
It sounds like they didn't try to offer a lot of hope to your parents for long-term success with your health.
Exactly.
Just because of they didn't understand. It was beyond their scope at the time.
Right, exactly.
And I would think in Los Angeles, you probably had access to probably some of the best doctors available for whatever it was at the time.
Right.
So that's kind of that's a scary thought as a parent to think about your child.
Exactly.
But it lends to the, I guess, severity of the condition, right? It helps us to understand that. So anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
It's very complicated, and so I had surgery when I was 3, and it was a long surgery, and they said that they got some of the repair done, and they were able to patch me up, and I was in the hospital for several weeks, and that was more common at the time anyway. But when I was released home, I was still having trouble breathing and getting the oxygen I needed, but I made it through the first phase, basically, of repair. And then I was told, I think I was 6, and my mom told me that I would need to have my second surgery, which I already knew I would have to have more, but I was hoping just to not think about it. When you're a kid, it really affected my life. I couldn't keep up with anybody. I had to sit out at PE. I couldn't play.
Yeah.
All those things.
And not to get into much of the detail of the condition, but I'm just curious now around that. What were they doing? Were they trying to repair your heart? Were they trying to rearrange organs? What were they doing in the surgery?
There was actually no rearranging organs. That's pretty rare what I have, and they considered it a birth defect, and so it didn't really seem to complicate the heart thing. The heart thing with the tetralogy flow, that's really 4 issues with the chambers of your heart, my heart valve, and I had several unusual things with the anatomy of my heart, the condition of my heart, the valves. And so that's why I think they wanted just to buy time, get me just to the next year.
Right.
And so the decline started to really happen when I was 6, and my mom's like, we need to get you back into surgery. And I was like, yeah. And when she told me my next surgery was actually going to be on my birthday and I'd be turning 7, I was so upset by that.
Sure. Well, yeah. 6-year-olds are really only thinking about their birthday party, right?
Exactly.
Presents
I was
and cake and
exactly. So she was wonderful. My parents were wonderful, and I had a birthday party before going into the hospital, and this is why I'm here. So when the day of surgery, I remember my parents had our priest, the church we went to, come in with his wife and pray over us before going into surgery. And it was very somber. And I was still just upset that it was my birthday. And here I am sitting in a hospital bed on a gurney waiting to be taken into surgery. But I couldn't ignore the fact that I felt like they were very concerned. But at that time, when you're a child, you don't really understand your own immortality. Mm-mm. And so I just remember saying goodbye to my mom and dad and thinking, this feels different. And I don't know why. My mom is very strong and kept it together. My dad was upset, and the priest who I loved and his wife it just felt like a goodbye.
Yeah. Well,
And
a priest praying over you.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
even a 7-year-old probably would recognize that.
exactly. This
Yeah.
is, dire situation.
Mm.
And so I remember from my previous surgery going into the OR, and at the time, this was early 70s, and they had those big gas masks with
Yeah.
that bad smell. But I remember at this time, they're like, what flavor or smell would you like? So they had advanced that, and I got excited about that. And they were like, count to 10 backwards. And, after I think 7, I was out. And then in the earthly realm, it had been 10 hours, like a 10-hour surgery.
Long, so okay.
And I remember, after surgery, they take you into ICU. And I remember I was starting to wake up in ICU, but it was that, anesthesia fog and just pain, tremendous pain. And then there was panic all in the ICU. All of a sudden, all these things were going off, and chaos, and nurses, and everybody was frantic. And I was awake enough to know something's not right. And I kept hearing, she's got a bleeder. She's got a bleeder. And we got to get her back in surgery. And I remember if I had had the energy to cry, I'm like, I just got out of surgery. I don't want to go back. And, because they staple it's a full chest crack, and they had to crack it back open. And I was aware enough of that, and just devastated. And so they wheel me back, and then I remember the gas mask, and I'm like, I'll do the same. It was pineapple. I love pineapple. And the mask went on, and then this is what happens in the spirit realm. I don't know how much time had passed earthly. Obviously, I was knocked out. But I opened my eyes, but I know it was more of my spiritual eyes, because I know medically I was under anesthesia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was so incredible. I saw angels everywhere. And what blew me away is that I knew they were there the whole time. I was like, oh, now I can see you. It wasn't like, oh, they came down because there's a crisis. It was, we've always been here. And it was beautiful, because I didn't see distinct faces, but there was, the form. It was loose, but what was very distinct were the wings. And not every one of them had wings that I could see, but there was a few that were just massive. And they were white, like white. I've never seen white like that before. And they were beautiful and powerful. This is all, and I was just looking around, and it was tremendous comfort immediately. And I was like, I'm so happy I can see you. This is great. And then a wing came down and scooped me, and I was like, oh, I'm going home. And I'm 7. And that was exactly where I wanted to go. And I was cognizant enough to know at that time that I was leaving a loving family, my brother, my animals. And I remember thinking, they're going to be really sad, but I wish they knew that I would see them soon. And I'm being cradled and carried up out of the OR, and I'm looking back, and I can see my body and ripped back open, and panic and chaos. And I remember thinking, I am so glad I am leaving that broken body. And it didn't, normally that would be alarming as a child to see that, but there was no feelings of alarm. It was like, oh, I'm going home. And then we started leaving the room, and I was thinking, oh, I wish my parents won't be sad, because sadness doesn't exist where I'm going. And then it was a horrible vacuum suction feeling and I remember thinking, I don't want to fall. Don't let me go. And it wasn't that they dropped me. It was not my time. And I remember being sucked back in like a flash, and I heard, oh, she's coming too. She's coming too. And then that mask goes on my face again. And then I wake up in ICU, and I'm in the hospital for weeks, and I'm waiting to see the angels and not really understanding why I wasn't seeing the angels, but I knew they were there. More than anything, I felt like an imposter in my own skin and my body, and I wanted to be free. It felt kind of like a prison, and I would have not known that, that I didn't grow up learning that. And, I feel like I had this amazing, I didn't feel, it was an experience. It changed the trajectory of my life. And my parents, we went to an Episcopal church, and it was lovely. But I struggled because I was like, there's more. There's so much more. And then I remember once I got home from the hospital, I kept waiting to be taken up by angels, just to go for a ride. If anything, I'm like, let's just go fly somewhere, or just hold me like that and give me a break from this pain, from this recovery. And it got to the point where I went and asked my mom and dad, and I said, I saw angels during my surgery, and can you tell me why I can't see them, or how can I see them again? And at the time, my mom left the room crying. My dad dropped his cup, and it alarmed me. And my dad said, "Oh, you had passed away." They put us in a padded room in the hospital and said, "Your daughter's not going to make it. You had a bleeder," and they couldn't find the source of it. And during the surgery, the bleeding stopped when they took me back in without any medical intervention. And so I took that initial reaction as, oh, I passed on, and that must have been terrible for my parents. And they weren't really equipped at the time to talk about it with me. And so I didn't talk about it for years.
Was your dad saying that he was admitting or saying that they had told him that you had passed during that time?
That I was passing, and that they put parents in a padded room, and because they were like, we can't find the source of the bleeding.
Did he know? Was there any sort of confirmation from the doctors? It's like there was a moment in that procedure where we thought we had lost her.
Yes.
So there's like a sort of a death confirmation and then a reviving that took place.
But there was nothing they did to revive. I just came back.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
So questions that I think anyone who wants to get to the bottom of this, I'm going to try my best to ask those questions. The first thought is, okay, well, this is a second anesthesia that she's getting in a short amount of time. Aren't these just the effects of the anesthesia, right? Or the procedure? Is she having a dream, or is she hallucinating because of the pain? Or I don't know what those things are. If there's a confirmation that you died at some point during that procedure, and that seems to coincide with this vision of these angels, there's a little bit more of a challenge there. And so what you're saying, it sounds like you're saying, is that they were anticipating you passing away. So they put your parents in the padded room.
Right.
I'm just wondering if they said there was a time while we were doing that she did code and somehow or another, and we didn't do it, but she came back and the bleeder stopped on its own and we never did it. Does that happen?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that specifically. I fast forward a little bit to answer that question. I met my husband in college, and he is an incredible man. We'll be married 31 years next week or end of the month.
Great.
Thank you. And he was the first person I had shared this story with after telling my parents, years before. And he and I met, I was 20 when we met. And he was fascinated. He was in medical sales and working for a heart medical company at the time.
Oh, really?
And so he was versed in what I had, and he's like, wow. And so he is very thorough and called Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. He has all my medical records. And so I know he knows exactly what happened. But Stacy, it's weird. It doesn't even matter to me, the details, because I know that experience is more real than anything I've ever experienced in my life. When I talk to my friends about it, I try and equate it to a memory they had as a child that was significant, like baking cookies with your grandmother, or, riding a bike, or something that they know is real and connect with. That what happened to me in that operating room, seeing angels, is significantly more real than any of those warm, fuzzy memories.
It's like a core memory.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't want to get to that. I guess the first question was, did you die that day? And a near-death experience typically is associated with a clinical death taking place, and then during that time, people experiencing these extraordinary things that they come back and report.
Right.
And the commonalities are what really start to begin to get interesting. But then whether medical technology revives them, or in your case, just a sort of a supernatural. We don't know how she came back and what stopped the bleeding, but yay, here she is. Yeah. That's good. But then people are able to tell about them. Yours happened in the 70s, which this was at a time where that was just an hallucination, right? And
exactly.
And we've learned a lot more about it now. But love hearing, this is kind of before NDEs were cool, right? So
That's right.
You mentioned an aspect of your experience that all of it is fascinating to me, but there's an aspect of it that I find really fascinating, and that is the fact that you, during this time, believed that your consciousness or your spirit became separated from your physical body.
Yes.
Left your body and was above your body somewhere, such that you could turn and see the scene from above.
Yep.
Can you describe that in as much detail as you can?
Yes. And that's, I think, part of also the effects or the experience of a near-death situation, because even though this happened at 7, nothing's faded. I still feel, I still can see, I still don't have earthly words for it. And, I remember giving birth to my children, but then that fades after a little bit, and you don't really remember all the specifics,
right.
Big events. And so I remember being cradled by this wing, and I was like, that was just the best feeling. And I was aware that we were going up, and I don't know if I turned my head. I'm assuming I did turn my head, or if it was an eagle's eye view of the OR, but I could see everything crystal clear.
In the room.
In the room. I couldn't hear that well. It was a little muffled, but the scene was absolute chaos. And I was like, oh, that's my body. And I saw, the clamp that had the chest open, and it was all hands on deck. People were racing around, and there was lots of wires, tubes. I mean, what you would expect in an OR. But for me at 7, I was aware of all of the machinery, the heart-lung machine, everything to keep me going during that time, and all the equipment. I mean, thank goodness. But I also had that cognizant thought that, gosh, it's hard there on earth, and just leaving a little bit. I'm like, I felt like my super self. I felt like, because I used to think when I was a child and going to church, am I going to be me in heaven? Like, I remember having that thought, am I somebody different in heaven? And it was amazing because I'm like, oh, no, I am me to the 100th degree.
Just a way better version.
A way better version.
Completely healed.
Yes.
I don't want to put words in your mouth on what you experienced.
Right.
All the study I've done on them, that part of it is fascinating as well. I do want to get back to the out-of-body experience. It's called an OBE, or out-of-body experience. Which, did you go anywhere other than the room? Did you elevate beyond the room, but still interacting with your earthly environment?
Yes, I elevated outside of the OR. We were still in the hospital. I feel like we were leaving the hospital, but I had the sense that we were still in the building, but we were going upwards. And then, because then it wasn't like that. It wasn't like, like you leave a room and shut the door. I was still aware of the OR situation, but it was just sort of panning out. And then I was just tucked in, ready for the ride. I'm like, let's go.
I'm sure.
I'm excited.
I'm out of here, man. This is good.
Exactly.
Did you see anything outside of the OR that was an earthly environment? In other words, did you get 2 or 3 floors above, or see the top of the hospital, or?
I didn't see any of that. It was just sort of this empty space.
Okay.
But I could tell they had walls. There was walls, but I didn't see anything specific, or like an exit sign, or, any other
people.
I feel like I was sort of in the catacombs of the hospital.
Yeah. Here's what I get. And I've read several instances of people doing exactly what you did, but then also being able to see as they were leaving the room that they were immediately in. And then people going back and confirming the things that they saw.
Right.
A red shoe next to an air conditioning unit on the roof. And here's why that is really fascinating, and yours as well. I mean, you're seeing the chaos. Someone could say, okay, was she conscious at some point in the room so that she would know where these things are, and she just projected that? I don't know. Maybe not. But I mean, typically you're under the effects of anesthesia before you get into the room for surgery, at least in my experience.
Right.
That happens in sort of a prep room. And so you would never be conscious there. In fact, your only recollection of consciousness was in recovery, not in the operating room, if I remember correctly. Or was it? Did you have any consciousness in the operating room?
When they took me back into the operating room after I'd had that long surgery, and they had me in ICU, and realized that I was bleeding out somewhere. And then that's when they took me back into the OR, and I had just left there, and I was coming out. I was kind of waking up, and I remember them saying, "Oh, she's waking up. Give her some."
So you were conscious in the OR at some point?
I was.
Okay.
Yes.
So I guess a skeptic could say, well, okay, so she remembers the machinery and sort of the layout of the room, and that she's projecting that she saw that from above. And I don't know how to debate that. I mean, you can only say what your experience was. There were other feelings and emotions tied to this. But the fascinating
Yeah.
part to me about that is that if that is true, then it is proof that our consciousness, our spirit, does not cease to exist when our body dies.
Right.
And if non-believers ever digest that, and we lose this notion of saying, hey, when I die, it's just lights out. I cease to exist, and my body's going to decay. I didn't know anything before I was born, and I won't know anything after I'm born.
Yeah.
And you're telling me I died, and I was outside of my body watching the scene. My consciousness did not die.
Yeah. Oh, no.
It continued. In fact, it continued into a place of indescribable joy and peace and comfort that I have since longed for for the last 40 some odd years.
That's right. That's right. It breaks my heart. I understand, because I've had people challenge me on that. And because some of my friends, like, when you die, just things go black and that's it. And it's usually at a time like that where I'll share my story, and I'm like, that's just the opposite. And you become your super self, and it's just the beginning.
Well, that's the thing. We believe that life is eternal because, Jesus came and talked about life being eternal and talked about what awaits those who know him.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is why I love near-death experiences. I love the heavenly reports, and I'll be honest with you, we've had people on here who have had the opposite experience.
Yes.
That it was not a heavenly experience, and it was a torturous experience, and they were heading into a place of just unspeakable agony, and not just personally, but the things they could hear and smell and see around them.
Yes.
Which is really, it should awaken us. But we can talk about them being hallucinations or dreams or visions or whatever else it is, effects of medication or natural responses to trauma, whatever you might want to think it is. But when people talk about their consciousness separating from their body and witnessing things while they are in an unconscious state that can be verified, I think that's one of the reasons God gives us NDEs and out of body experiences.
Exactly, because we're supposed to come back and be
how do you make of that?
Exactly.
So, I find that just super fascinating and really, really powerful.
Yes, I agree.
So you talk about the way you felt once you had separated, and I believe you said you were like on a large wing is what you felt like you were on. Can you describe more of the way you felt?
Oh, glorious. And I think I had even a more extreme comparison since I grew up so sickly to that point.
So you could contrast it.
And the struggles that I didn't know, that's all I knew. And without even leaving the OR yet, I felt like I could run without being tired. I could breathe. Everything was amazing. And I felt like, because I always thought I had a good sense of humor, and I even thought I was a little funny. And when I was in the angel's wings, I'm like, I am funny.
Don't tell me you thought you had super funny
I was
ability.
like, everything that I suspected that I might be, I was
better. Yeah.
Yes. I was like, I am funny and I can do things. And so and that's what I was excited about, was kind of blending what I already, God puts things on our heart that are on his. And through this trying time, growing up to that point at 7, and but I was like, I'm so much more. But then the earthly body said otherwise, and just moments, whatever moments or seconds it was, I was whole. And that feeling is so indescribable and powerful that's what changed the course of my life, because I've had 3 more open heart surgeries, and I had brain surgery a year and a half ago.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting, because I talk to people, and some people encounter Jesus.
I know.
And communicate there with him, which is amazing. Some people see heaven and describe it in ways that just, you could sit at their feet and listen to it, and it's like, oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Yes.
And many of them report heightened senses and abilities pretty consistently. You experienced wholeness, and when you talk about your longing for it, I'm sure if all those things had happened, you would long for that as well. But you got a taste of wholeness, and that seems like it's the thing that has stuck with you the most.
Yes.
Man, that's cool.
Yes. Oh.
And if it happened for others and they were brought back, I think. Mike McKenzie was on not long ago. He had a near-death experience a few months back. It was 20-some-odd years ago, but he was back on here a few months back. And he talks about just a heightened sense of awareness. He said he didn't understand why he was standing on a hill, but he knew, for some reason, he knew exactly the number of blades of grass that were under his feet at the time. He could see a city. So he was on a hill, a mountain, and there was a valley, and then there was a city, very large city.
Wow.
And then there was a mountain range on the other side, and he could see the needles on the trees on the other mountain, on the trees on the other side of the valley. And it was just you could see, and you were there, and just hard to describe your ability there. Which is awesome, and he's not the only one. I've heard that from many, many people, and if you read books on near-death experiences, it's a consistent report. And these aren't religious people out trying to prove God. These are neurosurgeons that are collecting data around these stories they're hearing from their patients once they're coming back, or cardiologists, and they're just. So they got to the point, it's like, we should probably start recording these things. And they began to record them, and then saw a lot of these consistencies, which is really incredible.
Yes.
So it was a wholeness for you.
It was a wholeness. And it's funny, because I think it was after I met my husband and we got married, and it was even actually after we had children that, Stacy, I really thought that I was the only person that had ever gone through something like that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, wow.
And it wasn't until I had a friend whose husband was passing away from cancer, and I felt so sad for her, but I was also earthly jealous that I knew where he was headed. And so I remember I was like, can we meet for coffee? I really want to share something with you, thinking that it might give her comfort. And I was so nervous, and I was like, she's going to think I'm nuts. And I immediately started to tell her, and she's like, she's like, I know that. She's like, there are tons of books on people that have passed and come back. And I'm like, what?
Really? You didn't know about
sort of
the...
And so I went and read some of the books, and I felt gypped, because so many people got to see Jesus or got to go to heaven or see more than I did. I was like, I just got a taste. And I was
and you were changed for the rest of your life.
And it changed me forever.
I love this. It is so cool. And I've got more detailed questions about your experience. When I have conversations, or I'm in situations where the death of a loved one has occurred or is imminent, I've lived all my life in this immediately going into a place of mourning we're never going to see them again. They're gone forever. They cease to exist. All we will have is memories and sadness. And since my exploration into what people have reported who have been clinically dead and have come back, and it doesn't happen for every person.
Right.
There are people that have done that and come back. It's like nothing happened.
Right.
But so many people have.
Yeah.
I don't feel that anymore. And now, if the person is and from God, doesn't know God or whatever, I feel a much deeper sense of mourning and just, I don't know if tension's the right word, not because I'm not going to see them again, but because of their eternal future potentially. And I don't ever want to get into that kind of place. God makes those decisions, not us.
Yeah.
But I can't wait to get there. I really can't. I don't want to go now because I got kids.
I know, right?
But apart from them.
Yep. I know.
And
I know.
I don't know. Sign me up for that. It sounds great.
It.
And
I love it.
All of us who know God, I just wish more people could hear some of these stories so that they would say, oh my gosh, I miss my person for sure. It's hard here without him. I wish I could talk to him. I miss all that stuff.
Right.
But I wouldn't pull them back here for anything in the world because of what they're experiencing right now.
Exactly.
And I can't wait to join them.
That's right.
So, and that, people would say, yeah, Stacy, that's easy to say because all your children are still here. And I don't want to pretend like I understand it in a richer way. But heaven is real. God is real. And there is an amazing eternal future in store for all of us that some of our people that we know are already experiencing in that way. And so I get excited about that.
I do too.
You talked about angels and seeing angels. When you said there were lots of angels, what are you talking about? What did that look like?
It looked like clouds. If you're on an airplane and you look and see clouds that catch your eye or make you want to take a picture, that's my best analogy. But they overlapped. It was layers and layers. It wasn't just a sprinkling that covered the room. There was no gaps.
So it was like 20 angels or like 20,000 angels?
Countless.
Or
I layers of angels.
Really?
Yes. And I knew, even though I didn't see faces, they weren't outlined, but again, just sort of like a painting without the specific face. And some were big, some were smaller, and then some had these massive wings. And I believe some other ones didn't have wings. Or if they did, maybe they were smaller. And but I remember just that wing coming down, and it was just the best. And I knew that I was going to go fly with angels. And I didn't think earthly that I must be dying. That didn't even cross my mind. I just thought, oh, let's just hang out. You've been here the whole time. Why didn't I see you before? And so I felt this friendship. I felt this belonging. I felt this wholesomeness. I felt that the personality that I know I have, I was like, oh, I'm still the same person, just without all that brokenness that I see down there. And then, like you said, when I got older and realized other people's experiences, and then feeling gypped that's all I got to do. Then going back, I had my third surgery at 9, and when still a young kid and it's not what you want to do, I was really disappointed that I'd have to have a third open heart surgery. But I was like, okay, well, if this is what I need to do to see angels, let's go. And I didn't. It didn't happen.
Mm-mm. So you didn't have an episode where you coded in this one, unfortunately.
Nope. I know, right? I woke up and I'm like, I didn't see angels. And then my husband, we have 3 amazing kids. They're adult adults now, but they're always your children, and they're incredible, incredible. And the doctors were concerned about childbirth because of my heart, and it's one of those pieces that I give God the glory for not listening to that. I was like, I know I'm supposed to be a mother. I know that. And I know I'm going to have 2 boys and a girl. I didn't know I'd have twins, but I have twin boys and a daughter. And I was like, I know that this is why I'm here, is to be a wife and mother and to share God with them. And I had my 4th open heart when my boys were in 5th grade. My daughter was in 2nd. And Stacy, that age, they're tender, sweet, they're young, they're just developing. And from my experience when I was 7, I wasn't scared at all. I was like, either I'm going to go home or I'm going to go home. With young children and my husband, who I adore. And I carried that into my 5th open heart. Even with the kids older, I'm like, well, I've taught them to swim. They can drive. They can do all the basics really well. They know how to do laundry and cook. But still, it was, to me, going into pretty major surgery. No, they are major surgeries. It was a win-win. And the brain surgery about 1.5 years ago, that was rough. That was unexpectedly hard. I had gotten a little, maybe too confident in my ability to recover from surgery, which it's not my ability at all. The doctors told me I wouldn't be able to walk, that my face would be paralyzed, and just so many dire things. And not any of those has happened. Through God, I've healed and overcome. And it just, even with the trials, I'm so joyful and so thankful. And only God does that. Who's thankful for surgeries?
You had an experience that changed your perspective, which is really amazing. Did you experience any sort of communication during that time?
Like,
did you feel like
hearing?
Did you feel like you were communicating with the angels, or they were communicating with you, or was God, or was there any sort of communication between you and them?
Not a verbal, not a, hello, daughter, I'm bringing you home. There was no audible or verbal communication. And it was so unnecessary. I feel like that would have almost tainted the experience, because the presence of the Holy Spirit, the angels, was better than words. It was like a heart download and I'm 7, and I was never trained in, we didn't talk about angels. We didn't, we had communion. I went to Sunday school. I learned, about Adam and Eve. It was, the basics. But I knew it's unquestionable, the love of God. The love of God changes everything. And it didn't need words for me. I realized how I was so loved that it changed my life forever. I've never felt rejection or anything like that, because he did that for me without words. It wasn't necessary.
That's interesting. I hear that communication, that there have been some where words have passed back and forth,
right,
that they could hear, but that most communication, the word we would use for it is telepathically, I guess. That'd be our earthly term for this sort of nonverbal but very clear communication going on there, which is also pretty exciting to think about. But you experienced that. I mean, the communication was, what did you feel like other than you are loved?
I knew I was loved. I knew I was going home. I knew the time was already different, that even though on the earthly realm, my parents would spend the rest of their lives without a daughter, that seems like an eternity. But as I was flying, I knew that time I just kept thinking, I wish they knew I would see them soon. And it wasn't because I knew I was going to get sucked back into that body. And so the time frame.
It was because you knew that it would be effectively in the flash.
Yes, a completely different realm without really knowing it was a different realm. I just knew.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's interesting that you think about that now. And, I guess a question might be, okay, so you've had decades of education post this event, of study, of reading, of potential opportunity for embellishment.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sort of creating things that maybe you didn't necessarily experience at the time. People do that with stories, and it's the fish I caught. Is, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
You feel like any of that's happened? Has it been pretty consistent?
No, I didn't see where you were going with that, but that's what's the clarity of that experience. It's the same today as it was back when I was 7, that nothing has faded from it. I still feel that love. I still feel wholeness in my heart, even though other things break down. I know I have a wholeness, and I know I'm adored, and I'm cared for by our Heavenly Father. And the best probably way to give an earthly answer is that my friends that I've shared this with, I would say that it's exactly the same. There isn't, I added that or I sprinkled that. I would never do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think we intentionally do those things. It's like a story tends to grow over time, right?
Yeah.
The legend tends to grow,
right.
And you wonder, if any of that's taken place. Let me ask you this question. This also sort of from the position of the skeptic. How is your experience different than, say, a dream?
Oh, Stacy, a dream can sometimes be hard to recall, or if it's really powerful, like a dream that you can't forget. To me, that's very cerebral, and it's sort of like a memory. But this flying with angels was an experience. And so let's say I think an example of my brother has a boat, and he used to take us all tubing. The kids, we'd get together, and it's some of my kids' favorite memories. And I remember I got on the tube, and that's an experience. And that I felt, and it was excitement and fun and laughter. And then over time, even that fades a little bit. You're like, oh yeah, that was fun. And you just sort of have a memory, or the pictures kind of jar your memory of the details of the water or the feel. And this experience is just completely opposite. It's like there's no fading, there's no forgetting, and there's no way to embellish something that I don't have words for on this earth. You say glory, you say love, but to experience that is completely different. And it's there's no need for embellishing or trying to convince somebody, because that's not my job. God did this for me during a scary event. And I used to have conversations with God saying, can you just visit me while, I'm walking the dogs or something? Does it have to be something like that? But I think I've learned through sharing this that I just share my story, and then God does the rest. And I feel that I'm overstepping if I'm trying to convince somebody of what I experienced.
Yeah. Yeah, the question was, what if this was just a really powerful dream or some sort of a hallucination, given the medical situation at the time? Yeah, what's your argument against it just being one of those
One
things?
of those. Well, having more surgeries and other health issues. I have had, anesthesia, and I've had hallucinations from pain meds and, side effects from all the medical things. And honestly, those feel like hell.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel anything like what I experienced. They're terrible.
It wasn't a I'm going home thing. Yeah, and I try to think of conversations I've had with people around this. I keep trying to create something like this in my own mind for myself, and I see it like a movie playing out or a memory of something. And when I talk to people, they effectively say to me, I don't know how to describe this any differently other than the fact that I didn't think about being there. I was there.
Yes.
As real, if not more real, than I am here in front of you right now.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't want, I know that's me putting words in your mouth,
No,
but that's kind of
exactly right.
what I've heard from people. It's like, I talked to Kim Marsh. She was on here a year or so ago, and she actually the ceiling opened up, and I was like, so is that like a projector? It's like no, it was in 3 dimensions, and I was interacting with it.
Yeah.
So it was like 3D. It's like, okay, that's different than a vision.
Right. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so neat, and the fact that it didn't fade over all these years, I think, is also pretty interesting. Have you had any sort of supernatural inbreakings into the world that you've experienced since then? Because you just said you had other surgeries, didn't get to see the angels. But I wonder, did any sort of door open for you through that with other gifts, or have you seen anything since that time? Any other supernatural?
I do. I think what God did for me when I was 7, it was so heart related, and so I feel that the way I hear from God is through my heart. It's not audible. I went through a season where I'm like, I don't hear from God. He doesn't talk to me. And then I realized he always has, and he does it here, because I'll walk into a room and there's a sense of people's lack of wholeness for me. And it's not a criticism. I just know that people would call it compassion or sensitivity, but I believe that it was from that experience that it heightened my senses as a feeler for other people. And when other people are hurting, I hurt, and I know people can do that without that experience, but I have to be careful with how much I expose myself to, because it does something, I think, supernaturally. And I commit to trying to want to help, pray, and for people, because I want them to know, but then to do it in a way that's loving and compassion and kindness, and not always sharing that story, but just kind of walking out what was given to me in that experience. And I did have an open door to the demonic realm. Can I talk about that?
Yeah.
So when I was a young mother, I had my 3 kids at home in elementary school age. My husband was out traveling, and I like to have all the kids in my room because I got fearful of something that could happen to them. And if there was a house fire, just all these things, and wanting to be prepared. And I just felt like this guardian, and it felt like it was all my responsibility.
Had you always felt that way?
I, as a mother, that struck me that they were under my
Sure.
control. And I had sort of stepped out of my lane, for sure, in the sense of knowing that God's in charge. But I was like, I'm in charge of their safety. And I took that very seriously. And during the middle of the night, I had horrible dreams, and to the point where it woke me up, and I could actually hear some screeching. And I looked up in the corner of my bedroom, and it was these demonic entities just swirling. They were black, prickly, sort of faceless. I saw some claws, and they were just in a circle, like a little tornado in the corner of the room. And then I was like, okay, I see what I'm doing. Through my fear and through thinking that I'm in charge here, I feel that I allowed a crack, to the enemy to come in and create some chaos. And as soon as I saw it, you would think it would be frightening, but I knew enough. I was like, I've seen angels. I have flown with angels. You're ridiculous. I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. And I was frustrated with myself, and I asked for forgiveness, and I said the Lord's Prayer, and they vanished. And so I was like, huh. And it was the only other real experience that I had seeing something and also having such unspoken understanding that was evil. And it was months later that one of my sons, we were in the kitchen and he was chatting. He had just spent the night at a friend's house, and he's like, and Mom, I've seen demons. And I was like, what? And I was already thinking, oh, maybe it was just a bad dream. And I was like, are you sure? It wasn't a dream? He's like, oh, no. He's like, I'll show you. And he walked into my bedroom where we were all sleeping. It was like our little camp out. And he pointed to the exact same spot in the corner of the bedroom and it described the exact same thing.
Really?
Yeah.
How old?
Oh, he was maybe 9, 10. And my jaw dropped, and I was like, okay.
So when you saw this thing of demons, you don't feel like that was a projection? You feel like that was something visible?
Oh,
yes. Interacting with your environment?
Yes. It was like they came to visit.
Manifested in your room?
Yes.
You said you heard something screeching or whatever. Did you hear that with your ears or in your spirit?
And actually, that I heard in my ears, and it wasn't loud, but it was something that you're like, ooh, no, I wouldn't want.
Yeah.
Let's turn that off,
Right.
And
but you heard it with your ears, not your spirit.
But I did. But then I understood in my spirit what it was. I'm like, oh, this is not of God. This is from the enemy, and the swirling to me was an understanding that we're here to create more of what you're feeling, this fear that you're in charge. They were coming in to just stir things up.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because you're talking about having an experience as a child where you saw angels. I mean, the room's filled with them, and you're actually being taken up by them as you're clinically dying on an operating table.
Right.
But then your next experience, I mean, you've had many other brushes with death where you didn't actually clinically die, and nothing.
Right.
And then as an adult,
Right.
a mother with kids, you suddenly are able to see in the spiritual realm. So in my view, and I don't know how it all works. I wish I did.
I do too.
But this would be the first time that you've seen in the spiritual realm.
Right.
Even
Right.
though you interacted with it. And just the way I understand it and see it, when you die on this earth, you experience that. You experience it. And that's what, in my mind, that's what happened. You
Right.
died,
Right.
you experienced it, you came back to life, the experience stopped.
Right.
But you had the memory of
Right.
it. Now, you suddenly are able to see in the spiritual realm. And you didn't see angels. You saw demons. And we've had several people on here that are seers.
Yeah.
And they say,
Yeah.
Stacey,
Yeah.
you see a lot of stuff you don't want to see
Right.
when you get that gift.
Right. Right.
So this is really the first time you're saying that you've seen. So do you believe that your experience at 7 opened a window for that? Or is this a completely independent of that and maybe God opened your eyes to something?
No, that's a good question. I feel in reflecting on both those experiences, well, I should clarify, the angels, that was an experience. That was a complete download of love and that I was already known. I was accounted for. I was important. Seeing the demons, it was just like an unwanted guest. They didn't know me. They didn't know, it wasn't personal. It was just like, we're here to make things harder. And so and I wouldn't say, I'm definitely not a seer. I used to want to be. I ask for that gifting, but now I'm glad I don't have that based on friends and things that I've read. But it was very clear what they were. And then for my son to have identified it, weeks later, maybe months even, and just out of the blue, the correlation for me is that heaven and hell are real. And I never questioned that, but I got to see it. And maybe by experiencing angels, I also had to see the demonic and to be more cautious with my thoughts, actions, that there was nothing loving about it. It was all terrible. It was like they only wanted the worst for me and my family. And it was so clear but what it also did was back then, the word demon was not, I never really used that word. But once you see some, that's what they are. But God is so powerful. Like just that the angels, God's word. I mean, those demons left. When I said the Lord's Prayer, they vanished. And I realized that it's not, and that's why I don't think I was scared, because I knew I was walking in the authority that we have.
So interesting that a demonic presence manifested in your room, and even that your son reports seeing that. You wonder how that happened. Was that God opening your eyes to saying, Bentley, you have allowed fear into your home, into your heart, and this is what that looks like. Are you going to allow that to stay?
Right. That's exactly what I took from it. That hey, and then I felt like it was learning a lesson, like God letting me know, hey, you've allowed fear, and your children are actually my children, and my job is to protect them. Yes, do your part, but it accelerated I call it my Jesus journey. And you would think after that experience at 7, which is the foundation for everything, but it goes like this. The journey's up and down. There are hills and valleys, and times of agreeing with things that are not of God, fear and anger and things like that. And so
it's just, you speak of it as if you didn't just allow fear the demonic presence of fear, even, to so get a foothold inside of your consciousness that you projected something. Again, you're saying this wasn't a real vivid thought that I had, or a dream sort of in this sleep paralysis state, or any of those things. You seem to be indicating, it's like, no, Stacy, it was the corner of the room, and they were there.
Yep.
Manifesting in front of me. Not a vision, not a dream.
Nope.
Not just my imagination because I've allowed fear and I'm paranoid and what was that sound outside and all the other things that we do when we get scared and allow fear.
Right.
But it was beyond that. It was
100%.
It was them there with you in the physical.
And they woke me up with that sound. It was a terrible sound. And that's what woke me.
And you had never had that happen before or anything like that?
I had not had that happen before. There was no unity. There was nothing about that was pleasant. It would be like having a rabid dog come in, gnashing his teeth. And I mean, it was just very clear.
So you took that as a lesson, like a all right, let's not allow this. There's things that you can do to not allow this happen again.
Exactly.
Have you seen anything else?
I've seen gold flakes, gold specks, and that was amazing because it was actually when my father was in hospice, and he was in a VA home at the time. It was a great facility, actually. And it was another time where I thought I was large and in charge. I had grown in my faith even more, and I was trying to match up cerebrally with what I felt here. And I was concerned about my dad's salvation. And so I call it my Bentley bag, and I have anointing oil. I've got communion cups.
Yeah.
I was going to hit him hard with Jesus.
Because you felt like he might not have been.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And because of those 2 experiences, which he knew about the angels, and I never shared with him the demon story, but I had planned to at that time, saying, Dad, you got to make a choice, because it really is one or the other. And I would like to see you in heaven. And he was not really coherent. He was already dying, and he couldn't see me, or he couldn't speak at the time because he died, I think, just the next day. And this is how powerful God is, because I love my dad, and even though he was a church-going man, I had no idea where he was with Jesus. And so my brother picks me up from the airport, and he drops me off at the VA to be able to say goodbye to my dad. And I'm kind of worked up with some emotion, and like, this is crazy. I'm losing my dad. This was about 8 years ago. And I had my bag of ammo, I had my Bible, and I'm like, trucking in there to save my dad. And I walked through his door in his room, and it was like walking through an oily waterfall. And I was in a different realm. I walked in, and I felt this weight, and it's the weight of glory. And I don't even really know. I don't know what that is really. I just knew that I was being washed because there is heavenly activity, and I look around and it's like just gold flakes everywhere. And it was such a heavy that I felt, again, I felt dirty. So I felt like, and immediately I was humbled because I'm like, God, I thought I was going to save my dad. Clearly you're already here doing that and I remember thinking in my mind, may I stay? Because there's something glorious going on right here. And so I gently just sat down in the chair, and it was like moving in slow motion. And Stacy, I think I just sat there for like 8 hours. It was a long time, but I would have probably said 3 minutes. But it was like, don't open the Bible, don't pull out your oil, don't do communion, don't do, because that was all what was going to make me feel better. And it was so beyond that. And I'm looking at my dad, who's taking some of his last breaths. I couldn't even cry. And it wasn't because I didn't love him, but there was so much beauty going on that I feel like I got to witness God prepping my dad for heaven. And anything that I would have said or done just was almost irrelevant at that point. And then I just felt nudged to get up, and I was like, my time was over there. And I kissed my dad on the forehead, and I said, I love you, and I honor you, and I appreciate you being my dad. And I walked out. And I was like, thank you, God. And as we were talking earlier about losing loved ones, especially children, like that is beyond my comprehension. But I do know that I've lost loved ones and I don't cry. Honestly, I'm jealous. It's terrible.
It sounds like a crazy thing to say.
It does.
Until you believe that life is eternal.
Right.
Until you know it.
Exactly.
And you don't just believe it anymore.
That's
I don't
right.
think.
That's right.
I think you know it, and because you've experienced a version of it.
Yeah.
Gold flakes. What is that? I mean, what does that look like?
The only other so I didn't know, but it felt like the presence of God, and literally gold flakes, but they weren't landing on like his bed. They were in the air. So I didn't know, but I saw them, and it was just like little sparkles, but they looked like gold flakes.
Sparkles in the air.
And sparkles in the air. And then that feeling of that waterfall and that weight. Like when people talk about the weight of the Lord, or when God enters in, there's a weight. I didn't know that, but I can only imagine that's what they're talking about, because from that experience with my dad, because I went to a conference with a friend of mine, and it was a healing conference. And to me, at the time, I felt like, okay, this is a little out there, but I do have this brain tumor. I do need healing. I'm down. Let's just go check this thing out. And it was somebody that was going to baptize. It was for healing, and I was desperate for healing. And I had tinnitus in my ear. I had the screaming going on, and I had lost my hearing in this ear, and I still hadn't had my other open heart surgery. So I was feeling pretty battle worn. And during this conference, and the speaker, he talked about other examples of healing before we did the baptism. And he talked about one woman who was healed of cancer, how when everybody was praying and worshiping corporately, he described it like a portal, and gold flakes came down, and he told the woman, like, go get under those gold flakes. And it was way more glorious, and he described it better. But I was like, gold flakes. And then I kept looking back, but that was at a different conference. So now I look for the gold flakes, but I I think heaven sent for healing. And this woman was healed of cancer, and because they showed a full body X-ray, she had all these cancerous things in her body, like lumps or whatever, and then a scan after that, and there was nothing. And so, the visual helps for people, because I'm like, is she really cured of cancer? But then I'm like, oh yeah, she is.
Right. So was your experience with your dad before this conference or after this conference?
It was before this conference. It was years later.
So you hadn't heard of
I had not heard
gold
that.
flakes
Exactly.
when you experienced them in your dad's room.
Exactly. And honestly, I haven't really looked into it more. I don't feel like I need to cerebrally understand. I just pray for gold flakes.
And you view that as the presence of the Holy Spirit in the room, thicker than normal.
Yes.
You also associate that maybe with healing?
Yes, I do. At least in those two circumstances, it was directed towards healing. And actually, I shouldn't say healing for my dad. It was more of salvation. It was confirmation in my heart that God had my dad, that he is going to go to heaven. And I had really worked myself up to wonder, where's he going to go? I don't know. I got to make sure he's going to go to heaven. And that's where I've learned that stepping out of humility, that I've got to, and God, I think because I was so God's like, no, Bentley, here, I'm here. I'm here before you got here. I've been here the whole time.
Gold flakes.
I know.
I want to hear, I suspect as we talk about this and people hear this, somebody's going to say,
yeah, we may learn more.
Those too, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen gold flakes other than that time?
No.
Just the once?
I mean, really just the once with those gold flakes. Yeah. I did wake up one night when I was having a bad dream, and I said the Lord's Prayer, and I did that, and I was like, ooh, was that a gold flake? I think I wanted it so bad. So that's why I know I can compare, because when I desire something, sometimes you think you can project it, but you can't with God. God is not anything that I could create myself. And so then I go through periods of wanting so much more, but I know God can only give me what I can handle.
That's right. And I think a lot of skeptics take that position. It's like, hey, you guys have adopted this belief system.
Yeah.
And you so desperately want to experience these things that you just project them to be the case. They think that's what's happening when people are baptized in the Holy Spirit and they begin to speak in tongues. It's like, hey, look, by God, I'm just going to start doing it.
Yeah.
And, I've got the gift, right?
Right.
And I think it's a legitimate argument. And,
I agree.
And I think there's a good possibility that there are a lot of people that in fact do that.
I do agree with that.
And, but there are other people that I've had conversations with who have said it was in an instant and they weren't my words. I can't inflect in those ways. It was not that.
Right.
So yeah, I think there are a lot of Christians that can do damage to the truth of the power of God by manufacturing things, and that's one of the things that we want to do here. Is we try to we try to see that for what it may be, and ask questions around that to make sure that absolutely. That it's not just what we want to experience or we wanted to hear, or so and so says they've seen in the spiritual realm, and so I'm going to see some demons in my corner of my room, and those things, and those are we can't brush by those doubts and not address them. And that's why I ask you, how is it different from a dream?
I know, no, a very fair question, and I've even been approached by friends, or really more family members, they're like, jealous might be too strong of a word, but like, well, why don't I see angels, or why don't I get to see gold flakes, and you must do something special, or, oh, you've gone through hardship. And we just want to, there's so much that just naturally our human minds want to understand that we're not supposed to. And And that's what I've learned. And I appreciate what you do here, because it's giving me a chance to share my story, and then God does the rest. And I would love to be able to give you more detail. I wish I could tell you Jesus and I frolicked through the fields and I got to hang out with John the Baptist. I desire so much more, but again, and with proof, I would love, because that's a lot of times, especially skeptics, they want proof or else they'll discount the story. But then I go back to anybody else that has, let's say, a skeptic or, a warm, fuzzy memory. And what if I I need proof of those cookies that you made with your grandmother that gave you the warm and fuzzies, they were oatmeal raisin, not chocolate chip. It's not my place to tell somebody how they feel, but I understand that you have questions, especially when we're talking about angels and demons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of the default Western position. We want the proof. We've got to scientifically verify everything, and it sounds like a cop out, but what we don't understand is that there are things going on beyond the tools we have available to measure them with.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think that's on purpose.
I agree.
And I think it's genius.
I do
I'll be
too.
honest with you. And Scripture outlines, and it sounds like a justification. It's like I've hidden these things from the wise and revealed them to a dude in Alabama.
I love it.
Or others, right?
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
And the unwise or the uneducated, Jesus talked about a lot with the Pharisees.
Yeah.
It's the prostitutes and the tax collectors who are beating their breast before God that are going to enter, rather than those who have positioned themselves as the intellectual elite. So it's so we pray for the intellectual elite that the veil be lifted. Agreed. And that they see a reality that's beyond the confines of academia, right?
That they're okay with the unknown. And
with the fact that we're not going to have the capacity and the tools to measure things that are well beyond what we experience. It sounds out there, but until people experience it. And, it's interesting because you talk about thinking you were the only one who had experienced it. And a lot of people don't share these things.
Right.
Because they're afraid
that
people are going to think they're crazy.
That's right.
That they are schizophrenic, that they are hallucinating, that they are...
no, it's true.
And so people will remain silent for a long time. And I think there are a lot of people there are people that come out with things now for gain that are that we have to use some discernment on. But increasingly, just on this podcast,
right.
Heidi was on not long ago. Just an incredible story. If you haven't heard that one, but
I did. That
when
was
when
awesome.
I asked her about watching demons enter people during these satanic rituals, she's like, black tar is the best way to describe it. And then just in the comment section alone, people were like, black tar with exclamation points. Is like, that's exactly what I saw.
Yes.
And
wow.
And so when we share them, gold flakes, and for me it is a wind that blows over me.
Wow.
So it's a cool thing, and I think it's cool when we share those experiences without fear of sort of condemnation, because what it does is people say, that happened to me.
Yeah.
I experienced something very similar or the same thing. So cool. So cool. Yeah. And this experience, I love watching you tell the story of you going into this place with these angels and how it felt and what you saw. And the lingering lifetime effects of it
doesn't fade.
is so powerful.
Yeah. I like what you said, and again, appreciate what you do, because you open the door, but for people to relate or be like, oh, I can understand that, or oh, I'm interested, let me research more, or not, choose to hear or believe or even be interested and be skeptical or stay in skepticism. And I think what I have just recently learned is a fear of man. And it took brain surgery for me to be like, you know what? I'm not scared anymore.
Yeah.
Because, that's exactly why I didn't share the story until when my husband and I was 21, 22, probably, when I knew we were dating enough where I was so concerned because I was so in love with this man. And I was like, but he's got to know this massive part of me. And I remember we were on a trip and I was concerned that he might be like, ooh, I don't know about this girl.
Glad I saw that before I proposed.
Yeah, exactly. Not sure I want to put a ring on that. But true to form, he was like, you, at the time as my girlfriend, he's like, you would have no reason to lie to me.
Yeah.
And so that, and then it freed me to really just express, like, you're giving me this chance, and it blessed him, he would say. And just to know that, and I think there is like, oh gosh, that'd be nice if I could, fly with angels. Who doesn't want that, honestly?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, and now, I love that. It's more of it. I've been through too much to be quiet, and I just got there. I mean, it's taken a lot.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. Jesus is worth it all.
So cool. We get a little bit more seasoned in life.
Yeah.
And you kind of look back and it's like, what am I afraid of here?
Exactly. Yeah.
God has done amazing things in my life.
That's
and
right.
It really kind of started with this amazing experience that I have
Right.
Kept a lid on
Yeah.
for this long. Why would I do that? If
Exactly.
it reveals the awesome glory of God
That's
that I
right.
believe I experienced. And I have had a chance to analyze it and doubt it and question it and all these other things. And no, man, this is what happened.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
It is. I love talking about it.
Yeah. Bentley, so good, man. I thank you for your obedience and the fact that you say, hey, I am going to speak about it. You were recommended, and we had a great conversation.
Appreciate
And when you said near-death experience, I was like, all right.
All right. Meet this later. No, I appreciate you having me very much.
Yeah.
This has been so fun.
It's the best.
Yeah.
And you got a light around you, and you got good stuff in your future. And
Thank you.
I love
received that.
I love the way you are energetic about something that maybe you kind of kept quiet for a long time.
No more.
Now.
Yeah.
And with other things that you've experienced along the way, and I think
Yeah.
that's just beginning. Sounds like you're also a person who spends a lot of time with God now. Is that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. That's the key, right?
It's the best.
That's the key.
It's the best.
It is abiding daily connection
Yes.
to the living God, who
That's
is
right.
the source of all the good
He is the
stuff.
source of everything.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Bentley Hornak,
Eh,
thank you for being
Thank
here.
you, Stacy.
It's been the best conversation.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
One of the most compelling bits of evidence that life does not end in our physical deaths has to be when people report seeing their body and the surrounding scene from a position outside of their body after their clinical death. Bentley had that experience well before people began reporting similar experiences. And if what she and others report is true, it is proof that life doesn't end at death. And if life doesn't end at death, we need to seriously evaluate how we're investing our lives now. Jesus tells us that if we know God and His Son Jesus, not know about them, but know them, our earthly deaths will just be a beautiful, mind-blowing transition into an eternal heavenly life with God. Bentley got a taste of that as a child, and it changed her forever. I hope it sparks a similar reaction in you. Seek God and get a taste for yourself. Thanks for joining us today on A Stronger Faith. To reach out to us, please visit astrongerfaith.org/contact. If God is calling you to become a financial supporter of this ministry, you can do that at astrongerfaith.org/give. Until next time, spend more time with God, and we'll be praying for a stronger faith for you and those you love.